I'm a Gito, she know, he know. The streets know I get 'em by the kilo. Nino, if you need those, holler on the dealer. I'm a Gito, she know, he know. The streets know I get 'em by the kilo. Nino, if you need those, holler on the dealer.
Yo, what's going on, podcast family? This is your boy MTV coming back to you again with a quick little change to channel episode. I warn you now that I'm not going to be my usual joking and playful and fun self, because what I want to talk about today is something that is kind of near and dear to my heart and something that I do take very serious. Today is Friday the 13th. It is July 13th. And, a lot of people look at Friday the 13th and they think superstition, they think Jason movies, they think, whatever. And plus, some people just not giving a fuck about any of that. And they thinking, welcome to the weekend. Today, on Friday, July the 13th, it is the 5-year anniversary of the acquittal of George Zimmerman for the murder of Trayvon Martin. And that's something that, when it happened, really just resonated with me very seriously and very deeply. And it is something that I cannot take lightly, because I remember thinking to myself that I have been a young black man walking home from the store with a hoodie on. I definitely have been stereotyped and or profiled to be a thug just because of the way I'm dressed or because of the area I was in. And I remember the murder of Trayvon, which happened in February of 2012, I believe. I remember when it happened, I remember thinking that could have very easily been myself, So it was something that always resonated with me and really just touched my heart and touched my soul. So fast forward to July of 2013, when George Zimmerman, who had been on trial for the murder, was acquitted. It was for me personally, it was worse than the police that beat Rodney King getting off. It was worse than, there was nothing that I could compare it to. It's I personally, at the time, I remember likening it to the lynching of Emmett Till, the murder of Emmett Till. It's the same type of thing where black lives are truly shown to not matter in a time where you can just be some dude on the street and just take the law into your own hands and make your own decisions. Emmett Till was murdered for, quote unquote, whistling at a white woman. And I don't know how familiar you are with that particular situation, but hopefully you do know that the woman who was allegedly whistled at, on her deathbed, came out and said that she lied about the whole thing. She didn't want to die. She didn't want to meet her maker with that horror on her conscience. And, this is 60 some odd years later or something like that. This 15-year-old boy was murdered, beat, drugged. And praise God for the visionary queen that was the mother of Emmett Till. She refused to allow her son to have a closed casket. She forced that casket to be open. She requested that casket to be open, and she forced America to see what the truth was, what really happened to her son, and that was really a turning point for the civil rights movement. Don't get me started lying, but I feel that was on maybe Time magazine, I think, picked that up. I could be wrong, but there was definitely a media outlet that picked up that photo and ran with it. And that was really a huge turning point and really something that resonated across America and, was a huge catalyst for the civil rights movement. So praise God for that visionary queen that knew that was going to be something for us to latch on to as a community and as a country. And that was for a lot of white folk, that was the first time that they really were able to put their a visual representation on what racism was in America. Even today, a lot of white folk don't really understand what racism is and understand, because you have to understand, if you have not experienced something yourself, it is hard to quantify it. For example, like anyone who listens to my channel does know I'm a huge advocate of mental health. And for the longest time, I didn't understand mental health, even though I'm sure I was dealing with it and battling it myself, but I didn't know what it was because I had never actually sat down and got the education and the know-how of being able to identify it. So if you are a white person in America and you are surrounded by other white people in America, and you don't have a lot of interaction with black folk, or you don't have a lot of interaction with Muslim folk or with Mexican folk or any type of like minority or people of color, it's sometimes hard for you to understand and quantify that. And I get that. But in this day and age, to be blind to it is to ignore it. And that's kind of what it was going on when Emmett Till was murdered. There wasn't social media. There wasn't, there was no way to be able to see all these, just vicious acts that were happening if you weren't around the acts happening. And this Time magazine, I believe it was Time magazine. Don't, like, again, if I'm saying the wrong thing, please don't judge the message by the incorrect delivery of what I'm saying. Just please understand it. Get to the point of what I'm trying to say is what I'm saying. So to be able to see this photograph of this murdered child and to know that the people that did it got off scot-free, it was a very powerful motivating factor for the civil rights movement. So to get back to what I was saying about Trayvon Martin, like I likened the two things to it because this exactly was the same thing, where it was just an individual off the street with no authority whatsoever. He likes to crown himself as neighborhood watch or whatever the fuck that is. I just call him top flight security. You know what I'm saying? He was just a fuck boy with a gun, basically. You know what I'm saying? But let me refrain from becoming emotional when speaking about this, because I do want to really focus on something, because it was just a regular random dude that just saw someone with a face that he didn't like and decided that he was going to take it upon himself to enact whatever justice he felt necessary. Now, the young boy Trayvon, he was just coming from the corner store with an Arizona iced tea and a bag of Skittles. That was his only crime that he had committed, was just walking home black with some snacks and having a hoodie on. Now, Zimmerman called 911, which we all know that that's the thing to do when you see some black folk doing nothing, is to call 911. Shouts out to my homeboy Jones of the Stakes of High podcast, Jones and TC of the Stakes of High podcast. They had an episode the other day called 911. It's not a chat line. I really urge you to listen to it. It's on SoundCloud. It's on iTunes. Very dope episode. But so the Zimmerman calls 911 and he informs the dispatcher that I'm following the young man. The dispatcher says, do not follow him. There is no reason to do this. And he continues to follow the young man anyway. And then he confronts the young man. If you believe George Zimmerman's testimony, he was then attacked and was fearful for his life that this 17-year-old, 150-pound boy was going to hurt him. At the time, George Zimmerman was a 28-year-old man, 200-pound man, and he's fearful that this 150-some-odd pound boy was going to hurt him in some sort of way. The man that you're following and harassing. So we all know the story. George Zimmerman pulled out a gun, murdered Trayvon Martin on the spot, and used as his defense the stand your ground law. And 12 jurors felt like, hey, you know what? That's cool. That's all right. Let's go ahead and let him off. You know, this is the 5-year anniversary of a court of law deeming it lawful to follow, harass, basically stalk a young man and murder him for absolutely no reason whatsoever. You know, and in case you're not familiar with George Zimmerman, because like this was one thing that always bothered me when this case was being talked about 5 years ago, is that people wanted to call Trayvon Martin a thug. They wanted to say he had done this, he had done that. He was a thug. He was, Zimmerman was standing up for himself. Let's talk about some of the things that George Zimmerman has done since being acquitted of the murder of Trayvon Martin. So in the last 5 years since the murder of the 17-year-old, Zimmerman has attempted to auction off the murder weapon. Yes, he tried to sell the gun that he murdered a child with. Shouts out to the company where he actually attempted to auction the gun off. They snatched it off the site. They said, "No, we're not gonna have no part to this. You're not gonna do this on our site. We don't want to have anything to do with it." So, shouts out to that company. Since murdering Trayvon Martin, he's given interviews, which he was quoted as saying, "I know how to handle people who fuck with me. I have since February 2012. And just to remind you, February 2012 is when he murdered Trayvon. So, like, he's giving interviews and he's letting you know, like, hey, you fuck with me, you're gonna get the same outcome. This is what he's saying. He's made appearances at gun shows to sign autographs as if he's a fucking celebrity. As if he's a celebrity. He's signing autographs at gun shows. He threatened to murder a man in a road rage incident in which he pulled alongside the man, brandishing a pistol, brandishing a gun, and said, "Do you know who I am?" He's riding the fame of being a murderer. Do you know who I am? And this same man that he threatened to kill in that road rage incident, Zimmerman went to his job 2 days later. Who knows if he had a gun on him? I'm going to assume so. Who knows what his intentions were? I'm going to assume they weren't good. What else has Zimmerman done in the last 5 years since being acquitted of murder? Oh, he painted, because he's a painter. He's had several paintings that he's sold on eBay. One of the paintings was a Confederate flag with the message, "The second protects our first," was basically saying the Second Amendment is the right to bear arms. It's protecting our First Amendment right to the freedom of speech. And he sold that on eBay. He once retweeted a picture of Trayvon Martin's dead body. Twitter has since deactivated his motherfucking Twitter account. Shouts out to Twitter for that. Zimmerman has had the police called on him in 2 separate domestic violence situations. One in which he was alleged to have been pointing a shotgun at his then girlfriend. The other is he's alleged to have thrown a wine bottle at his then girlfriend. And mind you, his ex-wife is on record and has come out to say that Zimmerman has threatened her and her family members with guns and with violence. She didn't ever say death or anything like that, but she did say violence. Oh, and let's also not forget that recently in an interview, George Zimmerman said that he would beat up Jay-Z and feed him to an alligator. And people are calling Trayvon the thug. George Zimmerman is a piece of shit. Period. I can't believe that this thug, that this hoodlum, that this murderer is just allowed to walk around free. Is just allowed to walk around with impunity. Basically getting accolades and getting fame off of his murder. Selling paintings on eBay. Making appearances to sign autographs. Attempting to sell a murder weapon. So yeah, I'm gonna get up out of here. Like I said, this is just a very short episode. This is just something that I needed to speak about. This is just something that I needed to get off my chest and just remind folks that since this murder has happened, the Black Lives Matter movement has launched, gained a lot of steam, but we still see that not only do we die at the hands of police, We die at the hands of random onlookers, like for having our music too loud. We get the police called on us for sitting in the coffee shop, for checking out of an Airbnb, for having a barbecue, for being a little girl who wants to sell some water to go to Disneyland, for being a young man who's the CEO of his own lawn cutting business, for taking a nap at a prestigious college, so it's hard to think that we've even made any progress since the acquittal of George Zimmerman, since the murder of Trayvon Martin. But once again, I'm going to get up out of here, man. I hope I didn't bring down your weekend, but I hope I just brought a little awareness to it. I still want you to go out, have a good, wonderful Friday, a wonderful, amazing weekend. Podcast family, I love you. I appreciate you for listening. But just don't ever forget that on this day 5 years ago, it was deemed legal and okay to stalk and harass a child and murder him. All right, podcast family, until next time, thank you for listening.
I'm a Tito, Sino, Hino. The streets know I get 'em by the kilo. Nino, if you need those, holler on a dealer. I'm a Tito, Sino, Hino. The streets know I get 'em by the kilo. Nino, if you need those.